Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. I am Simply G, and today I'm going to be showing off all of the manga that I got for the month of May, this 2020. It has been a rough month, I think, for most, if not everyone. And there's actually, books have been delayed as expected. We are in the middle of a global pandemic, so no surprises there. But despite that, I still have quite a few books. Many of them are older releases that had made their way to me that I had purchased previously in previous months. Some of them are ones that I found locally and jumped on before I missed out, basically. And there's a couple here that are, I guess, pre-orders. They've probably been out months in the US, but again, international shipping hasn't been kind to us not in the US. And I'm pretty sure shipping hasn't been wonderful in the US either, but even more so. So yeah, rather than spend too long, I'll get straight into it, and I hope you guys enjoy. So first up, for Viz Imprint stuff, these are some catch-up and I guess closing of the gap of a title that I absolutely love, but wasn't really high on my priority list for buying, mainly because there's no risk of this going out of print, and I am up to date with the manga via Shonen Jump, so I wasn't, buying it to read the chapters either inherently. But this is volume 34 and 37, which is most recently released in Australia. Books of Haikyuu, the sports volleyball manga from Shonen Jump. Both of these cover a pretty highly anticipated Nekoma game, and I don't want to spoil it for people who aren't familiar with the series or haven't read this part, but I'm sure most people have. I love Haikyuu. I adore it. Honestly, ever since the very beginning, I've loved it. It's just gotten better and better and better. I cannot say how thankful and how impressed I am with the current arc within the manga, which we haven't gotten in print yet. But it makes me so happy. But for those who may not be familiar with Haikyuu somehow, this is a sports series featuring our main character, Hinata, who's not on either of these covers, who is inspired to play volleyball after he sees a short player like himself, a shorter individual, called the Little Giant. It inspires him to want to play volleyball, and so he decides to join the high school team of the same school that the Little Giant went to when he reaches high school. Prior to this, he really didn't have much luck. There was no. He was the only member of his volleyball team in middle school, and he only ever played one official match, which went terribly, but ultimately led him to meeting Kageyama, who kind of conversely to Hinata is this prodigy volleyball player. He is a setter. He's incredibly good at what he does. He goes to a very prestigious, he's within a very prestigious and well-known volleyball team in his middle school. But somehow they catch each other's eyes and they become rivals pretty immediately. Hinata swears revenge, basically. But ultimately, when they reach high school, they end up on the same team. And they become each other's kind of partners in being this new wave, this new era of very strong players within the Karasuno team, which is where they go to high school. I love all of these boys. I love all of the teams. All of the characters who matter, at least, are very memorable. All have very distinct personalities, and all really play a part within the series. And it's really nice to see that Furodate hasn't forgotten any of the characters, despite there being dozens upon dozens of them, because they are all really likable. I think most people are invested in all of these characters, or most of these characters. I don't think there's a character in Haikyuu that hasn't had like hasn't been part of a kind of a main game or whatever, hasn't had a focus on, who people really overwhelmingly dislike. Yeah, I think every character has their diehard fans. And I'm pretty sure majority fans really love all of the characters. Maybe most, but probably all of the characters. That includes myself. I love the cast of characters, mainly because they feel like real people. Nobody feels like a villain, which is an issue I have had with another sports series I've been watching recently. The rivalry between teams has done really, really well. These feel like high school athletes, right? They feel like high school kids. And as the series progresses, we see them grow in a very organic and natural way. And I love this series so much. Check it out. I'm sure most people know of it. If not via the manga, then definitely the anime, which is phenomenal as well. Just by the way, if you haven't watched that either, this is a great series, I think, even for people who aren't fans of sports shows, which I'm not like a die-hard fan for sports series, but I do enjoy the good ones at least. This is one that I think, for me, most of the people that I know, or all of the people who I know who have tried it, have enjoyed it. It's just one of those shows that has something for everyone. And yeah, the manga is fantastic. I love it. I cannot wait to get more, read more. And yeah, thanks, Viz. Some more older releases, or I guess catch-up or books that I got this month are the final 2 volumes of another shonen series which I've been loving, honestly, like adore. This is Kakaishi by Yellow Tanabe. This is volume 34 and 35. So, as I said, the last 2 volumes. I'm not going to open the last volume because spoilers, but damn if this isn't a wonderful series. It made me cry. I bawled at the finale and the, I guess, epilogue chapter. It was so good. I really like Yellow Tanabe's art style. I think it's very, I don't know, classy. It's very, it's not overly detailed. It's quite simple, but it's very striking because of that. The action as well is very easy to follow, easy to understand where all these characters are and how they're moving. And once again, it has a very well-balanced cast of characters. As I said, I cried a lot when I finished reading this. I tweeted, I only cried 5 times, thank you very much. And that's not really an exaggeration. It was very, very, very good at, finishing what it had started, and the impact was real. Yeah, I cannot wait to actually reread this one from the beginning, because the whole time it was really enjoyable. It continued to pleasantly surprise me. I said this when I started the series, in that I had heard a lot of good things about the series from people who've read it. It's one of those shows, or one of these manga that is kind of underrated insofar as not a lot of people know about it, but everyone who does know about it speaks very highly of it. And so I wanted to try it out. I knew that it was probably going to be something that I'd enjoy. It is focused on Kakaishi and sort of yokai. It's written by a woman, and it's not super duper long. 35 volumes is kind of pushing the limit for me as to like the length of series that I tend to buy. So I wanted to try it. And volume 1, even the first like handful of volumes, it really pleasantly surprised me. I liked it a lot. And as I kept going, I just fell more and more in love with it. There's a particular moment when something very shocking happens and I cried, and I didn't realize how invested I was until that moment when that happened, and it broke my heart. And then that thing kept being incorporated, and that's what I really, really loved about this series and appreciated, was that like with the Haikyuu that I was just talking about, every part of this series is purposeful. It's reincorporated. There's stuff that I guess foreshadowed that was necessary, and I really get the feeling that Tanabe knew what she wanted to write and how she was going to do it, and this story wasn't overextended for popularity or drawn out or anything like that, which is what I really appreciate. I mean, that's the sign of good writing, is when you have a fully formed idea and endpoint and being able to work within that and to make the story the best that it can be, rather than perhaps, unassumingly overblowing your popularity and then having to drag it out and lose some of what made it so special in the beginning. But yeah, Kakaishi is wonderful. I do encourage you to pick it up. I think some of the volumes are out of print. This is not a hugely popular title, as I mentioned as well, but I think you can still get a majority of the volumes pretty cheap if this is something that you're interested in. If you're wanting a shonen, or if you're a fan of shonen action, but you're looking for something with a little less, I don't know, yelling power-ups and like high goofy energy, and there's a lot of quiet moments to this, a lot of introspective and like very interesting character moments, and just like little snippets of these characters outside of the plot within the story that makes it something that I really love. That's the sort of stuff I really enjoy seeing. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, or if you're just a shonen fan and you haven't tried this series, you don't know much about it, do give it a shot. It's very, 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 very good. It also has an anime, but that is also incredibly out of print, and I've never seen it, so I can't speak to the quality of it. But yeah, it's kind of an unfortunate situation insofar as that within the West, at least, this one was definitely a hidden gem amongst the other more popular shonen that were coming out at the time: Naruto, Bleach, Fullmetal Alchemist, One Piece, etc. It kind of just got hidden and buried under those, but that's not to say that this is any less good than those titles, and I would argue is better than some of those titles. But I don't want to get into that fight. So yeah, check out Kakaishi. And speaking of Fullmetal Alchemists, I finally received volume 8 of the Fullmetal edition. This, of course, is the newest release of the series from Viz. This is the Kanzenban edition. Beautiful color pages, glossy archival paper. And of course, this manga is one that I've read before. I adore. You guys know me. I'm a huge Fullmetal Alchemist fan. I love it. This is next volume 9, which I think has been released. I don't know, but the next volume will be officially the halfway point from these Kanzenban editions. There'll be 18 in all, and it just they're beautiful. I'm so happy that this particular series is getting this, I guess, updated, newer collector's edition. For fans like me and collectors who are particular about, having the nicest, most deluxe release on their shelves. I'm a big fan, so I was going to buy it. I do want it for, the niceness of it. But if you are someone who's wanting to read the series but don't really care about, having the most expensive, beautiful, like hardcover, etc. release, the single volumes, the 27 volumes, are still very readily in print. The box set's still in print. They also have 3-in-1 editions, which are even cheaper than the singles, very readily available. So I think it's nice to have various options when it comes to re-releases like this, especially for a title so hugely popular as with Fullmetal Alchemist. Yeah, I mean, this is, what can I say? Again, this is really a series that needs no introduction. Story of two brothers who, through the forbidden art of human transmutation, lose their body and or limbs and are trying to find a way to restore them via the mystical Philosopher's Stone, which is said to, reverse alchemy and do alchemy that would not normally be able to be done. But of course, that's just sort of the initial premise. There's a lot more to Fullmetal Alchemist, and it again has a great cast of characters, a lot of really compelling issues that it brings up, and a lot of interesting dynamics between all of the characters. I love it. Again, it's another series I make no secret of it, just adoring. I'm just a huge fan of Fullmetal Alchemist and all of its various versions. I initially read the series, the manga, via the Qiangyi release, which was the Singaporean/Australian edition, in which my sister still owns, coincidentally. Following that, I did own the Viz release of the singles for a little while, probably a year and a half. But when this was announced, I decided to get this version because I already knew the story. The early Viz books, the singles, are not inherently wonderful. I think there's a lot of inconsistent translation just because they had multiple translators working on it over time, and thus, like, in particular, like, names and place names really get muddled, and there's not a huge amount of consistency there, which is kind of unfortunate, but c'est la vie. But again, this is a wonderful action, adventure, drama, everything series. I mean, I came into Fullmetal Alchemist via the original anime, which was then followed by Brotherhood. And I started reading the manga at a similar time, perhaps just a little bit before Brotherhood aired. So Fullmetal Alchemist has been a big part of my life for a long time. I was back in high school when, Brotherhood was started. So yes, needless to say, Brotherhood is a big part of, and Fullmetal in itself is a big part of my career and my experiences as an anime and manga fan. And again, for me, it was a no-brainer to be picking up these editions because I love them and I love these characters, and I'm really happy that we're seeing more Kanzenban and like collector's editions of beloved titles like this one getting a release in the US, especially for titles that would have the popularity to do so. There's some that I would perhaps think don't deserve this sort of re-release, but there's also plenty that do, and many, many fans out there who have different tastes from mine. So I'm glad that we're all being catered to, basically. But yeah, so Fullmetal Alchemist, I'm sure anyone and everyone has seen it, watched it, read it already. But if you haven't, be sure to check it out. And that's both versions of the anime as well. I actually really like the original. Obviously, that's what I came into the series on. But even now, I think there's a lot of really good stuff in there. And it's a very good adaptation and very good at what it wants to be versus perhaps being like a true full adaptation of the manga, because obviously the manga was ongoing and incomplete at that point. It does very well what it wants to do. And for that, again, another interpretation and one that I really respect and really enjoy. So yeah. Next we have the only debut title that I got for this month. I think technically this came out last month, but took forever to get to me. And one of my most highly anticipated releases, full stop, at all, for this year. It was my most exciting license of last year, and one that I will not shut up talking about, This is Blue Flag by Kato. For those who are not aware, I actually did an entire podcast episode about this series and this first volume as well, in particular, with my good friend Ray from Whimsical Pictures. That's on my channel here, so if you're wanting to watch that or listen to it, I guess, that's available for you there. It does have spoilers in the latter part of it, but we do talk more specifically about this first volume at the beginning, so you can, if you are just new to the series or if you're interested in the series, maybe check that out. But this is a shonen drama romance about a high school, well, really 3 high school kids, arguably 4, who are in their final year of school and get involved in a love triangle. Our main character here is Taichi. We also have Futaba and his best friend, Toma. And so basically, Futaba has feelings for Toma, and Toma is definitely like Mr. Popular. He's very outgoing, he's very likable, he's got a lot of friends, but comparatively, Taichi and Futaba are kind of on the lower rungs of the social ladder. They're very shy, quiet, kind of not very many people really know them or hang out with them, but Toma hangs out with Taichi because they are childhood friends. They've known each other since elementary school, and they were very close in the past, kind of grew apart later in life, mainly in middle school and high school when, you know, Toma became Mr. Popularity and Taichi kind of didn't. But now they're in the same class, and Toma's trying to rekindle their friendship and get along, you know, with his best friend once again. Anyway, because Futaba has an interest in Toma, she approaches Taichi because she recognizes that they're friends, so she wants to get to know him better through his friend, right? You know, that's quite a normal thing to do. Initially, Taichi doesn't want to help her because he really doesn't like her very much at first for some reasons that do become obvious. But ultimately does decide to help her with her romantic pursuits, kind of against his better judgment, perhaps. And needless to say, Taichi starts to develop feelings for Futaba, but obviously doesn't think he can compete with his very handsome and popular best friend. But then also Toma has feelings for someone, and so he can't necessarily reciprocate. So there's a big triangle going on. We also have our other main character, I guess, is Masumi, who is not on this cover at all. I don't know if she's on any of the covers, actually. Who's just Futaba's best friend, and she's also quite standoffish. But she's a bit more rowdy. She's a bit more, you know, of a rebellious type with an attitude, but very protective over Futaba, and doesn't like the boys whatsoever. And she gets embroiled in this whole affair as well. I will say that if you're not a fan of love triangle series, then try it, because I'm not a fan of love triangles, kind of in any media, but this is done so well. It's done so good, and I love the characters in this. I really love Kaito's art style as well. It's just absolutely beautiful, and I appreciate this story a lot for being outside of what I think a lot of people regard as shonen romance, which tends to be like romantic comedy, doofusy, you know, harem-y, like a plain guy surrounded by all of these girls and wacky hijinks, you know, follows. This really isn't that. It feels much more like a down-to-earth human drama. And it's so relatable. Like, oh, if you've been a high school student, there's points where yep, that was me, or yep, I know that guy, that, oh my god, they feel very much like real teenagers, which again is really refreshing, especially within high school manga, especially within shonen romance manga. Ooh, it's so good, and I hope everyone tries it because it's one that I've read in its entirety. This was available on Manga Plus for a short while in its entirety, and then later had its chapters removed. So now there's only the first 5, which is the 5 or so chapters, which is what is contained in this volume. It's available to read right now for free on Manga Plus legally. And then the last couple chapters, which is obviously the finale. So I read the whole series over this past year. The last probably 20-ish chapters of which were as they were released month to month. And I loved it. There's some things, there's certain aspects that can be criticized. I don't think it's a perfect series. I don't think it's inherently like the best of its type, but I love there was some real heart to this, and I really appreciate Kato as a creator for being able to make this type of series within, I guess, the Jump platform. I really appreciate how willing and believable and relatable Kaito's characters always seem to me, because I've read one of their other series, which is Cross Manage, which is on Shonen, the Jump app in its entirety, again, for people who are wanting to read that. That's a sports series, a really good one. Yeah, this I think is one that people should try. It's gotten a lot of buzz, a lot of popularity. It does have some controversial aspects to it, of which I don't disagree with, and again, if you've watched that podcast, you will know what I'm talking about. But ultimately, this series was one that made me care so deeply for the characters, that made me so concerned for their well-being and their happiness and their hope for the future, that I was satisfied, and the journey and the destination really were things that I loved about it. I don't have too many aspects of this manga that I could complain about. There's things that could definitely be changed, and there's certain opportunities that definitely could have been taken, but, you know, arguably, how much can you do in a shonen manga, right? And again, I'm trying not to spoil things for people who haven't read it, because I do want people to read this one. And again, even if you're not buying this book, although I do encourage you to buy this book because it's beautiful, and it is definitely a series worth reading, it does get my recommendation, like 100%, really, with a few, asterisks, caveats of things that could, be changed. You can read it on Manga Plus right now. At least those first 5 chapters, it gives you a pretty decent idea of what the story's about and how it handles things and where it's going. So yeah, Blue Flag, I love it, and everyone should buy it. Next is a title from Viz's Shoujo Beat line imprint, and that is volume 23 of Mizuho Kusanagi's Yona of the Dawn. Basically just the most recent volume of Yona. It continues to be wonderful. Oh my god, my heart just continues to break and be filled and then break again in this series, because I love it, and I laughed so hard at this panel and this whole segment. It is wonderful. Yeah. Yona of the Dawn just continues to be marvelous. I am a huge fan of this style of shoujo. You guys know that. I'm really pleased that this series seems to have inspired a new wave of interest in shoujo fantasy, things, or shoujo, I guess, shoujo outside of the high school setting, perhaps, is the better way to put it. This, along with Snow White with the Red Hair, And in concordance with things like My Next Life as a Villainess, which is a very popular anime right now, Ascendance of a Bookworm, which is again very popular anime. Both of those are light novels, which have gotten print releases very recently. I like this trend. I like this trend a lot. It's nice to see it come back after so long, because this was sort of more normal and more widespread in the 90s and early 2000s, shoujo isekai and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, Yona, for those who haven't read it, what are you doing? Please try it. Is a story of a princess who is ousted from her kingdom, from the castle, along with her bodyguard, after the murder of her father, who is the king, by her cousin, who has claimed the throne. Once that's happened, she's on the run, and she decides to collect or find, really, the 4 dragons of legend who previously were told to have helped the Crimson King, who founded the nation and brought it into peace. So she's been traveling around the country looking for said dragons, who all, decide to basically she's trying to get her rightful place in the kingdom back. But we learn more and more about various motivations. We learn more about these characters. The dragons are all really wonderful, and it's quite quick. I appreciate that it's quite quick in finding all of these characters and then having them as a team, do various other things, and the group come across various different issues that can't be solved in the way that they were expected. Because for Yona, our main character, when she was in the castle, she assumed that everyone in the kingdom was happy, that there was no issues, that because there was no warfare, it was a time of peace, it was a time of prosperity. Now being able to see her land and the people within it traveling around as really a nobody, she's able to confront and help and assess issues that were persistent within the kingdom during her father's rule, and reassess, I guess, her perspective of her father as a ruler versus being her father, and whether or not he was a good king or whether he was more so a complacent king. It's very, very, very good. We're in a particular part where our main characters, Yona and the Happy Hungry Bunch, are in a neighboring kingdom, a neighboring country, and trying to, I guess, quell tensions on both sides. It's wonderful. Yona always makes me want to read more Yona. It kind of sucks because even though this is a very quickly releasing series, I think we get 2 volumes or one volume every 2 months, right? It's still not fast enough. As soon as I finish 1 volume, I cannot wait for the next volume. And we're catching up to the Japanese release, which means it's worse, because once we've caught up, we're going to have to wait so long between releases. It's going to be so painful. I think the Japanese has recently hit 31 or 32 volumes. So we're getting close, guys. We're getting close, and I'm kind of upset that we are. But at the same time, I need more Yona in my life, so also not actually that upset. But yeah, check out Yona of the Dawn. It's marvelous. Next, I'm going to start on the Yen Press titles. This first one is a series that I really enjoy. I read 3 volumes of this digitally before I decided to pick it up in print. Well, because they just announced that I'd be bringing it out in print. Recent anime adaptation as well. And this is volume 2 of Toilet Bound Hanako-kun by Aida Iro. This is... Oh, okay. First of all, I love the art style. I think people mention that all the time, but I really, really love it. This is a really interesting, fun little series that's really, really in my wheelhouse of stuff that I enjoy. It just hits all of my buttons perfectly. So this, if you're not familiar and if you haven't watched the show, go watch the show. But if you haven't and you don't know anything about this series, this is the story of a high school girl who manages to summon Hanako-san. So if you're not really familiar with Hanako-san, it's a quite common like urban legend within Japan, most notably in Japanese schools, that a ghostly girl figure will show up in the stall of one of the girls' bathrooms and grant a wish if you summon her, basically, right? She tends to be part of what's known as the 7 wonders, or the 7 mysteries of the school, quote unquote, whichever school, and she tends to be one of those. In this iteration of the story, Hanako-san is actually a boy, is still a ghost, still lives in the girls' bathroom, but is the ghost of a young middle school boy who goes by Hanako-kun. So after she summons Hanako-kun, she asks him for help with her love life, of which various things go awry. And later, our main character ends up, Nene is her name, ends up befriending and then kind of becoming the human assistant to Hanako, in helping him with some of the other school mysteries and some of the other unnatural things that are going around in the school. It's lovely. It's creepy. It incorporates and puts its own, original little twist on very normal and popular, urban legends and things like that. It incorporates a lot of yokai mythology and stuff like that. I love it. It's a funny little series. It has a lot of really interesting and fun little back and forth between these characters. They feel like kids. They feel, they have a very fun dynamic, but like with any good yokai / scary, spooky / monster ghost story, it does have this undercurrent of something just a little bit not right, a little bit creepy, a little bit sad as well, very sad, that isn't inherently obvious when you first start reading or first start watching, but is very prevalent throughout the story the longer you get into it. I've said this before with stories that handle inhuman or ghostly or yokai characters, is that what makes them so interesting and so appealing is that kind of the comparison of their morality, of their inhumanity to the human characters. Really, I don't think that inhuman characters have to be human-like or even relatable necessarily, or at least understandable in our sense of morality to be interesting characters, right? Or good characters, first and foremost. Again, I'm a big yokai kind of fan, so they get very biased for mine, but the fact that Hanako-kun and the mystery surrounding this school, and then also the conflicting opinions of some of the other characters later on in the series, makes this so interesting to read. And when we learn more about Hanako and his life and how he became Hanako-kun, or Hanako-san, you understand who he was and how he came to be, but also that's not inherently who he is now, and that also, it makes him more relatable, but in other senses, it makes it all the more obvious to when he is not human anymore, right? I don't know. It's just, it's so good. I really like the series. I think there's 12 volumes in Japan. The 11th volume just was released digitally, and this is the most recent print release. I think the third one was meant to be coming out. It probably got pushed back because of COVID, obviously. But I look forward to picking it up whenever it comes around, because you know me, I'm a big sucker for this type of manga. Next, we have the penultimate volume of Silver Spoon, volume 14 by Hiromu Arakawa. So more Arakawa in this haul. And yeah, I mean, what else to say that hasn't been said about Silver Spoon 100 times, right? I love Silver Spoon. It's a wonderful, wonderful, funny little drama about a high school kid who decides to go to agricultural school because he doesn't really know what to do with his life. He wants to escape the expectations of his family and the city. And in doing so, he discovers who he is and like his own strengths and what he wants to apply them to. And he's exposed to a whole group of people whom he really never would have had any interaction with otherwise. All of his classmates, or majority of his classmates, come from an agricultural background. They have an expectation that they'll go into agriculture or go into, I guess, the food production side of society. And so, I mean, majority of people, especially in Japan, don't really interact with people who, you know, run farms or are cheesemakers or whatever else. So it really is a fish out of water comedy with this very real, very determined and realistic depiction of the struggles of the agricultural society, right? I've said this before, I love the series. I think Arakawa, this is her magnum opus. It's the story she's always wanted to tell, obviously related to her own personal upbringing, growing up on a dairy farm. She has, I think, a bit more investment into this type of story than perhaps some other creators may. And I haven't read this volume yet. I haven't read the 13th or 14th. I'm waiting for the 15th, and I'm going to read all 3 volumes together because I kind of don't want it to end. I'm going to be sad, but I'm also ultimately going to be happy that we finally saw the entirety of the series be released in English and available in English. Because this was not licensed for a very long time, which again was bizarre considering Fullmetal Alchemist's success. Although they are 2 very, very different series. So don't go into this expecting Fullmetal Alchemist. It's still really good though, and arguably in places better. Yeah. What more can I say? Buy Silver Spoon, or at least try it out. Even if you're not a fan of Arakawa's other work, this is quite funny. I think she has a really, really strong sense of humor. I think the characters are very expressive in that humor, and then it's able to switch between the comedy and the drama very, very well. Yeah. Read Silver Spoon. The final volume for Yen Press releases is another comedy. This one a bit more of a situational comedy, and that is Skullface Bookseller Honda-san Volume 4. Yeah, last volume. I just read this the other night. It is so funny, and I think, like with all of the volumes of Honda-san, this one is definitely a more of a mixed bag. Honda-san said in the previous volume that was expected to be the last volume. So this is sort of a collection of a bunch of her Twitter stuff and like random event comics and things like that. So it's not really, I guess, pushing the narrative of the bookstore that she used to work for, mainly because she quit. She quit after the 3rd volume. There's nothing more for her personal experiences to tell. But we do see a little bit more of her experiencing like bookstores and publishing outside of of Japan, most notably Taiwan and Malaysia. And Asia has a really interesting publishing community, in my opinion. As someone who's kind of somewhat aware of the English side of the publishing community, because of that's what I went to school for. Asia, even outside of Japan, has a really interesting relationship with self-publishing and translation and availability and censorship and all of these sorts of things. That was a fun time. It was a solid little finish to the series, although ultimately I don't think it's necessary if you're just interested in Honda and her co-workers and the bookstore she actually worked in. But I think it really gives some insight to the art and the act of publishing itself. And a huge portion of this book is on ebooks and digital publishing, which I think is important for some people to read, right? Because I've had that argument far too many times, and probably made a lot of enemies over it. But I think it will give a little bit of insight as to at least the availability and the decision of digital publishing alongside print publishing, and how that impacts stores, how that impacts readers, etc., etc., etc. Regardless, fun, wonderful little series. So glad that we got this license. Thank you, Yen Press. And I think at 4 volumes it didn't outstay its welcome or anything like that. If you're a manga fan and if you like reading manga kind of about manga, because there's a 1,000,001 different references in each and every volume, then be sure to pick this one up. It's a lot of fun. Next, we have some books from a publisher that I don't tend to buy a lot of books from, but I was able to get all of the books that I needed for this series before they went horribly out of print again. I haven't received all of them though, so these are just the ones that I got. This is Omnibus Volume 6, Omnibus Volume 7, and Omnibus Volume 9 of Blade of the Immortal. I'm going to put these two over here. These are 3-in-1s. The 6th is a 4-in-1, arguably. And this is obviously Samura's Blade of the Immortal. Lots of violence, lots of death, lots of gore, a lot of sexual assault as well, so be forewarned. Again, I think that it's kind of part and parcel with this kind of historical fiction, drama, action type of series. But if you're particularly sensitive to that, be forewarned. That is in the series, most notably in this particular volume. But Blade of the Immortal, if you are not aware, is the story of a immortal samurai, I guess swordsman, called Manji, who slayed 100 people, then gained immortality, and is now trying to repent for those who he killed, because it ultimately resulted in the death of his sister. He becomes the bodyguard to a young girl called Rin, who is trying to get revenge against a group of swordsmen who are now a up-and-coming sword school, who murdered her father and her mother in cold blood in front of her. She's getting revenge for that. She wants to kill their leader and their members, and so they are traveling around trying to do just that. They have come into a lot of problems, a lot of issues since then, and revenge is always a sad and disastrous path to go down, and this is no different. Historical fiction, with kind of a supernatural twist with the actual immortality of one of our characters. And I like Samura's work a lot. I really didn't read any of his stuff until Wave Listened to Me, which has recently been released in print. I will be getting, don't you worry, but I've been following via Crunchyroll. And I really like that series. I know it's kind of polarizing, but I love the series. I haven't watched the anime yet, so I can't speak to that, but I love the manga. And that gave me enough confidence to finally try Blade of the Immortal after so many people for so many years have said it's wonderful. It is very good. I think it's in a similar boat to Vagabond for me, in that I enjoy it, I appreciate it, I respect it for what it is. It's not inherently my favorite series. I find a lot of these types of historical fiction about swordsmen and swordsmen and samurai, that sort of way of finding enlightenment or whatever. You could almost compare it to something like Vinland Saga. They have very similar evolution, like plot evolution. And that's not to say that's bad. That's absolutely not the case. But this, as well as Vagabond, were things that I had to get used to. And it grew on me slowly compared to other series where I read one volume and that's it. I'm in for it, and I know, like, I'm there. I'm there for the crazy ride. This and Vagabond as well. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna keep reading and read, and ultimately I enjoy it, and ultimately I like these characters, and I like the story and everything else, but it's not like an instant favorite for me, right? I know these are getting deluxe release editions, whatever. I don't care. I'm not gonna be picking them up. Dark Horse deluxe editions seem very nice, but all of the titles that they've announced for them, I'm not interested in, and there's not too many other titles that they even have that I'm wanting. So I'm happy with these omnibus releases. I really like the color scheme. I really like, just how they look. They're very sturdy. I was just reading this one today. The spine is perfect, despite, I know people always complain about glue spines, but that shows that they don't actually, majority of books, novels, in fact, have glued spines, and they're not made for, throwing across the room, but generally they shouldn't fall apart too easily. That's another complaint I get, or I hear a lot from the Viz Big crowd, and I'm just like, that I don't know what you guys are doing to your books, because I've never had that issue, and I'm not inherently the most careful reader, and I lend them out and stuff all the time, so I don't know what you guys are doing. Maybe I'm hugely lucky. Maybe have lucked out on every single thick omnibus book that I've ever owned, but I've never broken the spine. I've never lost pages. Anyway, yeah, Blade of the Immortal. I think all of these are still in print. They kind of cycle in and out of print with the deluxe edition, of course. That may not be the case a year from now, but who knows. So I'm sure people are checking it out or buying it. It's a hugely popular seinen. Also has an anime, which I have been slowly watching as I've been reading, because I don't want to get too ahead in the show versus the books. And that's fine. Like, it's an interesting companion to the manga. It's not like a full adaptation inherently. But yeah, pretty good. Finally, for manga, we have a Yuri title. This is from Viz, and I think it's kind of a soft Yuri as of right now. Recently released, it's the newest volume. There's volume 2 of A Tropical Fish Yearns for Snow by Makoto Hagino. I was recommended this series by Ray from Whimsical Pictures yet again. She loves this series, most notably because it's set in Ehime, where she is currently working, but also because it's just really beautifully done. This is the story of 2 high school girls, one who's recently moved there, the other who is the only member of their school's aquarium club, which is an actual thing that exists in Ehime. There's a school famous for their aquarium club, but the new transfer student decides to join the club, so now there are 2. And it's very sweet. It's kind of a slow burn. Perhaps, maybe they will fall in love, perhaps not, which may annoy some people, but I don't think it's very, like, baity or anything, like queer baity. I think it's quite obvious as to these girls' feelings, but because it's not an immediate, I don't know, I worry that because it's not an immediate, like, oh yeah, we're falling in love and we're even gonna call it love or whatever, that people might not like it very much. But I think it's really lovely. I think it's kind of slow-paced and quiet, and that's always a nice thing to see. Might not be your cup of tea if you're more wanting a quick, more overt or even more explicit type of Yuri stories, of which have become much more popular and much more widespread over the last couple of years. But it definitely does what it sets out to do, in my opinion. This second volume is more of the same. It's really wonderful. It's very cute. And yeah, check it out. It's nice as well because this, I mean, it's part and parcel with the fact that Viz doesn't have an imprint for Yuri manga like it does with BL manga. But it's nice that this is underneath just like the standard Viz logo, title, imprint, comparatively to their BL works, which are under the Sublime imprint, which kind of separates it from the main Viz catalog, which is kind of a shame. Although I think they'd get a lot less angry emails, perhaps, by doing that. Anyway, yeah, Tropical Fish Yearns for Snow, Volume 2. It's lovely. I think if you're wanting to try a Yuri and you're wanting something soft and sweet and, you know, just about some girls who are looking after some fish together, then check this one out. So that is everything that I got for this month of May 2020. There's a little more here than I expected. Obviously, quite a few of them are older titles. They're not inherently new releases. There may be some titles here missing that you expected. Basically, that's because, one, they'd never shipped to me, or I'm still waiting for them to arrive because, well, obviously, postage is not wonderful, and I can't just rock down to a bookstore. They wouldn't have stock anyway, even if I could. But I hope everyone is looking after themselves right now. We live in very scary times. I hope everyone is as happy and healthy and safe as they can be, and looking after their mental health as well. You know, there's so many things, not just with the pandemic, but also with general injustices that are going on right now, right now, that are just so inherently upsetting. I think just as human beings, people should be upset about, and it's so hard to stay positive and to stay hopeful right now. But I do hope that everybody is looking after themselves in the best way that they can, wherever you are in the world. I'm very, very lucky and very privileged to live in a country where I don't have to face prejudices. The health issue is far beyond in recovery comparatively to a lot of the other rest of the world. I'm very, very, very lucky, and I'm very aware of that. So I just hope that others who are not in the same position as I am are able to look after themselves in the best way that they can. I mean, all of this stuff is a fun distraction from just the ultimate terrible time that we're currently living. But it should never be something that distracts you so much from what is important in this world. And I mean, that's probably a bit heavy for the end of a whole video. Nobody really perhaps cares, but I do hope that everyone is looking after themselves. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on anything that I've talked about today, including these books, but not limited to these books. Your opinions on any of these series, whether you agree, whether you disagree, whether you're reading any of these or you've never heard of some of these. I love to hear it all. As always, my Twitter is in the description below. That is at collectingg, G with a G-double-E, as well as my Book Depository affiliate link, which I found that Book Depository is the most consistent in shipping out books for me right now, comparatively to Amazon and the rest. I don't quite know why that is. It still is taking a year and a half to get to me. That I'm being facetious, so it's not taking that long. But they are still shipping out books at a much more regular basis comparatively to Amazon for me. Yeah, you don't have to use that referral link if you don't want to, but if you did, I would greatly appreciate it. Of course, no obligation to buy anything if you do. And yes, I will hopefully see you next month. Hopefully, with a better, a better state of the world for one, but also hopefully with some more videos, not just of hauls. I will, of course, have the upcoming podcast episode for you to listen to. And, of course, as I mentioned, I will also link the Blue Flag podcast down below if you're wanting to hear my thoughts in more detail on that series, as well as my good friend Ray from Whimsical Pictures, her thoughts and opinions. But yeah, I will see you in the next video, guys. Bye till then.